Hello. This week, the keepers of the Akashic Records are asking us, how close can you sit with yourself in silence? How close can you sit with yourself in silence? And I invite you to consider what that question might mean to you. You could even pause this and contemplate it before carrying on. What they're asking us through this question, another way to think about it is, how often do you make yourself explain yourself to either yourself or another? How often do you force yourself to explain yourself to yourself or others? That was a lot of yourselves. And again, like what they mean by this is when you're experiencing a big emotion or something painful, do you first make yourself justify the presence of that feeling before letting yourself feel it? When you're angry or upset or sad, do you find yourself saying, I shouldn't feel this way, like I should stop being angry, there's nothing to be angry about. I shouldn't be upset without a good reason. There's no reason for me to feel this way, I shouldn't feel this way. How often are you saying or thinking things like that where you're dismissing the reality of how you feel because you can't find an explanation to justify the presence of that feeling? That's what they're asking us with this question. And when we think about that, like when we're sitting with that, that's a huge way to invalidate yourself. And it can be devastating if that's a habit. And I know that is definitely a pattern and a habit that I've experienced. And I see it in a lot of people where it's like you can't even be with yourself, that you can't sit with yourself and the reality of how you feel or what your experience is unless you have an explanation, unless you can justify it. And what happens when we can't think of a reason? If we can't have a logical explanation, if we can't come up with one of why we feel the anger or why we feel the sadness, then what happens? We just don't feel it. And so where does that thing go? Where does that pain or emotion go? It's like we're just swallowing it and holding it. Maybe until we can find an excuse to unleash it with more intensity and even potentially more harm onto other people. So what would it be like to just let yourself feel the feeling, to be with the reality, the neutral reality of your present moment felt experience, even if you couldn't explain it? And this is huge. That's a big permission slip to give to yourself. Because what you're doing when you do that is basically you're saying, even though I can't explain this, even though there's no reason for me to be angry that I can see or think of at this moment, I'm going to let myself be angry. I'm going to let myself feel this. And that is kind of radical. That's kind of a radical act to say, I'm just going to feel what I feel, even if I can't explain it. And in my experience, I developed this habit of needing to explain it because everyone around me needed an explanation. Like, we're not going to listen to you. We're not going to care about how you feel unless there's a good reason to feel that way. And so I did the same thing. And so it's just this, it was reinforced internally and externally. And so that's the invitation for today, to notice, is that something that you do? Do you tend to dismiss your feelings, your felt experience in the moment, unless you can explain it with your mind? Are you forcing your emotions or your heart to yield to the logical mind? Are you saying that your mind's logic, your mind's reasoning is more important? That has to be done first before we can drop in and feel what's here. So that's the first piece of this to notice. And the second piece is this invitation to offer yourself radical permission to feel. And that's what they're asking with this first question. How close can you sit with yourself in silence? And what that means is, how close, how deeply can you sit with the emotion that's present, even if it's silent, even if it can't explain itself, even if your emotion has no words, no reason, nothing to appeal or appease the mind's need to know why you feel that way. Even if you can't explain the emotion, can you sit right next to it and just be with it, even if there's silence, even if you don't understand it? Can you offer it that level of unconditional presence? That's what they mean when they're asking that question. Can you sit with yourself, even in silence? Can you be with your emotions, even when there's no explanation? Can you give yourself permission to feel, even if the feeling doesn't make sense to you? So that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I invite you to spend some time with this. This can be a tender inquiry. So be gentle with yourself. Be kind to yourself as you engage with this contemplation. And if this sparks something in you, if this inspires something in you, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment on this video or send me a message through my website, minaruchi.com. And until next time, I'm wishing you well. Namaste.